This is lesson 2.4, solving equations with the variable on each side. Your objectives are to solve equations with the variable on each side and to solve equations involving grouping symbols. Example 1. Solve 5y minus 8 equals 3y plus 12. Well, when you have variables on each side, you're going to want to add or subtract to move variables from one side to another. It's usually easiest to move the smaller one to the other side. You have a 5y on the left and a 3y on the right. Move the 3y. Since it's positive, subtract it from each side. 5y minus 3y is 2y, and that leaves a 12 on the right. Now, solve it like a two-step equation. You have 2y minus 8, so add 8 to each side. The 8's cancel on the left, and 12 plus 8 is 20. 2y equals 20, that's 2 times y. Divide by 2 to get the y by itself, and y equals 10. Be aware also that when you have the variables on each side, sometimes the variables cancel out completely from the equation. If that happens and the variables disappear, ask yourself, is the leftover equation true or false? It'll be one number equals another number. If it's true, like 3 equals 3, then the variable can be all real numbers. If the result is false, like 5 equals 0, then there's no solution. And you can call that the empty set using the Greek letter phi. Example 2. Negative 11 minus 3y equals 8y plus 1. Move the variables first. You have a 3y being subtracted, so add it to both sides to move it to the other side. It cancels on the left, leaving negative 11, and 8y plus 3y is 11y on the right. Now you have a two-step equation left over. Move what's added or subtracted next. That will be the 1. The 1 is being added, so subtract it from both sides to move it. Negative 11 minus 1 is negative 12, and the 1's cancel on the right. Now you have 11y on the right. That's 11 times y. Divide both sides by 11 to move it, and that moves it over to the left-hand side. It cancels on the right, and now you're finished. The solution is either negative 12 elevenths or negative 1 and 1 11th. Our equations are getting ready to be the most complicated that they're going to be. So you need to follow these steps. There are several ways to do it, but if you follow these steps, you'll get it right every time. To start, do any distributive property that you might need, and take care of any big ugly fractions by multiplying both sides by the common denominator. After you do that, combine like terms on each side of the equal sign, then add or subtract. That includes moving the variables and moving any constants. And then finally, multiply or divide. Make sure you take a minute to write down those steps because we'll be referring to that list as we do these questions. Solve each equation. Number 2. 5y minus 2y equals 3y plus 2. Well, there's nothing to distribute. There are no big ugly fractions. So combine like terms. You have 5y minus 2y on the left, and that's 3y. Now let's add or subtract and get the variables on the same side. To move the 3y from the right to the left, you can subtract it since it's a positive 3y. So subtract 3y from each side. On the left, 3y minus 3y is 0. On the right, the 3y's cancel, leaving you with a 2. Now look, the variables have disappeared. Is that a true or false statement? 0 equals 2 is false. So when it's false, there is no solution. So y is the empty set. Number 5. 1.2x plus 4.3 equals 2.1 minus x. There's nothing to distribute, there are no big ugly fractions, and there's no like terms to combine on either side. Let's add and subtract next. Move the variables first. The smaller one is the negative x on the right. Since it's a minus x, add it to both sides to move it to the right-hand side. That cancels on the right, and 1.2x plus x is 2.2x. Remember, x is 1x, so you're really saying 1.2x plus 1x is 2.2x. Now, what's with the variable? 2.2 and 4.3. Move what's added or subtracted next, and that's the 4.3. It's added, so subtract it from each side. It cancels on the left, and you get negative 2.2 on the right. Now that's 2.2 times x, so do the opposite and divide it. Both sides divided by 2.2. X equals negative 1. There's different ways to do number 7. Since I have fractions with different denominators, I can multiply both sides by the lowest common denominator, and that will cancel out my fractions. For 2 and 8, the lowest common denominator is 8, so I'll multiply both sides by 8. Now distribute. On the left, 8 times half b is 4b. 8 times 4 is 32. On the right, 8 times 1/8 b is 1b, or b, and 8 times 88 is 704. Now you have b's on both sides, so subtract b to get them to the left. Add or subtract now. Subtract 32 from each side to move the 32 over. 3b is 672. And divide both sides by 3. b is 224. When you have different denominators with your fractions, you can cancel out the fractions by multiplying both sides by the lowest common denominator. Number 8. 3/4 k minus 5 equals 1/4 k minus 1. There's nothing to distribute, no big ugly fractions, and no like terms to combine. So add or subtract the variables. Move the 1/4 over to the left. That's a positive 1/4 k. So subtract 1/4 k from each side. That cancels out on the right, and 3/4 k minus 1/4 k is half k. Now add or subtract. The 5 is being subtracted, so add it to both sides to move it away from the variable. Now you have half k equals 4. Remember, when you have a fraction times the variable, multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So multiply both sides by 2. That gives you k equals 8, because 2 times half is 1, which cancels out, and 2 times 4 is 8. Number 11. 0.2x minus 8 equals negative 2 minus x. What do you do first? Well, let's go ahead and add or subtract the variables to the same side. Move the negative x from the right to the left by adding it to each side. On the left, 0.2x plus 1x is 1.2x, and the x cancels on the right. Now add or subtract. The 8 is subtracted, so add it to both sides. It cancels from the left, and negative 2 plus 8 is 6. Now you got 1.2 times x. Divide both sides by 1.2. X equals 5. Number 14, 8 plus 4k equals negative 10 plus k. You don't have anything to distribute. There's no big ugly fractions and no like terms to combine. So add or subtract. Get the variables on the same side. To move the k to the left, subtract k from each side. 4k minus k is 3k. Now add or subtract. The 8 is added to the k's. It's a positive 8, so subtract it from each side. 8 minus 8 is 0, so it cancels. And negative 10 minus 8 is negative 18. Now divide both sides by 3. K equals negative 6. For 16, 2/3 n plus 8 equals half n plus 2. You have fractions with different denominators, so you can get rid of the fractions by multiplying both sides by the lowest common denominator. For 3 and 2, the lowest common denominator is 6, so multiply both sides by 6. Now distribute. 6 times 2/3 n is 4n. 6 times 8 is 48. On the right, 6 times half n is 3n, and 6 times 2 is 12. Now add or subtract to get the n's over to the left. To get rid of 3n, you would subtract 3n from both sides. 4n minus 3n is n. And the 3n's cancel on the right. Now move the 48. It's being added, so subtract it from each side. N is negative 36. Number 17, 2/5 y minus 8 equals 9 minus 3/5 y. Move the y's to the same side. You can add 3/5 y to both sides to move everything to the left. 2/5 y plus 3y is 5/5 y, which is just y. Now you just have a one-step equation left. Add 8 to both sides, and y is 17. For number 18, you have variables on both sides. Since we have negative 4r on the right, let's add 4r to both sides to make them move. Negative 4r plus 4r cancels on the left, leaving 5. Negative 4r plus 4r cancels on the right, leaving 5. That's a true statement. And when the variables disappear and the statement is true, r is all real numbers. Number 20. 18 minus 4k equals negative 10 minus 4k. Well, you got k's on both sides, so let's add 4k to each side to move them. When you add 4k, the k's cancel on the left and on the right. 18 equals negative 10. Is that true or false? That's false, so it's no solution. K is the empty set. For grouping symbols, if you have grouping symbols, you can use the distributive property first. So in this example, you can do the distributive property on each side. 4 times 2a is 8a, 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and on the right, negative 10 times a is negative 10a, and negative 10 times negative 5 is 50. Now we have an equation with variables on each side. You've got 10a negative on the right, so add it to each side. That moves it to the left. Now add. 4 is being subtracted, so add it to each side. Now you have 18 times a. Divide both sides by 18. A equals 3. The added feature now is that you'll sometimes see the distributive property and some big ugly fractions to deal with. Deal with those first. Solve each equation. Number 2. 2 parentheses 7 plus 3t equals negative t. We'll do the distributive property first. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 2 times 3t is 6t, and that equals negative t. Now I have variables on both sides, so let's move them to the same side. I can add the t that's on the right, since it's negative, and that'll move it over to the left. 14 plus 7t, and that equals 0. And now I can subtract and get the 14 over to the right. 14 cancels on the left. 7t equals 0 minus 14 is negative 14. And divide by 7. T is negative 2. Number 5. 5 times the quantity f plus 2 equals 2 times the quantity 3 minus f. We'll do the distributive property. 5 times f is 5f. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 3 is 6. Minus 2 times f is 2f. Now you have variables on both sides. Let's add 2f to both sides to move it to the left. Now we can add or subtract. Subtract the 10 to move it to the right. And divide by the 7. So f is negative 4/7. On number 8, you can use the distributive property first. 3 times d is 3d. Minus 3 times 8 is 24. And now you have variables on both sides. If you subtract 3d from each side, the 3d's cancel on the left, and the 3d's cancel on the right. So the d's are gone. Is that a true or false statement? Negative 24 does not equal 0. That's false, so it's no solution. D is the empty set. For number 11, you can do the distributive property. 1.2 times x is 1.2x. Minus 1.2 times 2 will be minus 2.4. Now get your x's on the same side. I can add x to each side to move it to the left. It'll cancel on the right and give you 2.2x minus 2.4 equals 2. Now add or subtract to get the constant over, so we'll add 2.4 to each side. And finally divide both sides by 2.2. X is 2. Number 12 has a typo. That should really just say 3 plus y in the numerator. When you have one fraction equaling another fraction, you can solve by cross multiplying. 8 times 3 plus y equals 4 times negative y. Now distribute. 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times y is 8y, and 4 times negative y is negative 4y. Get your y's together. We'll subtract 8y from each side to move them to the right. 24 equals negative 12y, and then divide by negative 12. Y is negative 2. So cross multiply when one fraction equals another. For number 13, when you have two fractions equal, you can cross multiply. 3 times a minus 8 equals 12 times 2a plus 5. Then distribute. 3 times a is 3a, minus 3 times 8 is 24. On the right, 12 times 2a is 24a, plus 12 times 5 is 60. Get the a's on the same side. We can subtract 3a from both sides to move them to the right, and then add or subtract to get the constant away from the variable. That's a plus 60, so we'll do the opposite and subtract 60 from each side. Negative 84 equals 21a. Finally, divide by 21, and a is negative 4. For number 14, we can distribute first. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 times 2k is 4k, plus 10 equals k. I have like terms on the left. 8 plus 10 will make 18. And now I can get my k's all on the same side. I'll subtract 4k from each side to move them to the right. Usually you move the smaller one to the other side, but it's okay if you move the bigger one to the other side. 18 equals negative 3k, and then divide by negative 3. K equals negative 6. For number 17, I've got a set of brackets with a set of parentheses inside it. I can do the distributive property on the very inside and then work my way out. So 3 times y is 3y, minus 3 times 1 is 3. That takes care of the inside parentheses. Now I have 2 times the bracket. I can distribute there. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3y is 6y. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, equals 22. Now I have like terms on the left. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. I need to add or subtract next. Add 2 to both sides to move it. 6y is 24. And finally divide by the 6. Y is 4. So when you have several sets of parentheses, work inside out. On number 20, I can distribute. 4 times 4 is 16. Minus 4 times 4k is minus 16k. And I have a 16k subtracted from each side. I'll add it to each side. That actually cancels out on each side. 16 equals negative 10. That's false. No solution. K is the empty set. So when you solve these equations with variables on both sides or grouping symbols, distribute first, then multiply both sides by any common denominators to get rid of any fractions, combine any like terms on the left or on the right, add or subtract to move the variables first, then move any constants, and then finally multiply or divide. If you follow those steps, you'll get it right every time.